Welcome to VSOW. Today we are embarking on a really comprehensive deep dive.
We are.
We're looking into an iconic, but I think often misunderstood philosophy, the complete foundations of Jeet Kune Do. We're aiming to move far beyond, the cinematic stuff, the surface level, and really drill right into the intellectual heart of the art.
Yes, and we're doing that by pulling directly from the definitive collection of its founders' writings, which are, frankly, intricate and complex.
Absolutely essential context, that is.
It is, because our sources, and we're drawing primarily from the material compiled in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, the TJKD, plus related scholarship on kinetics, martial arts history, they reveal something much, much bigger than just a fighting style.
Bigger how?
Well, the material presents JKD as one source really nails it, I think, calls it a unified field theory of martial arts and kinetic motion.
Wow, okay. A unified field theory.
Right. And the intention seems less about a system for fighting other people and more like a really rigorous roadmap for achieving, profound personal growth. Intellectual liberty, even.
That framing, unified field theory, that's immediately fascinating because the central idea we hit right away is this relentless critique, a critique of rigidity in practice.
Oh, exactly.
We're looking at why these systems, the set styles of classical martial arts, weren't just dismissed, but were actually called a fancy mess.
A fancy mess. Yes.
Leading to something even worse, organized despair. That's a powerful phrase.
It really is.
So the mission of JKD, then, it's highly philosophical. It's not about mastering a specific move, a codified technique.
Not at all.
But it's this relentless pursuit of formless form and personal freedom, both inside and outside of combat.
And that very goal, that philosophical aim, created this inherent challenge, almost a paradox, really, with the text itself.
How so?
The people who helped put this work together, they had this monumental task, taking something fundamentally alive and dynamic, this constantly evolving personal philosophy, and putting it onto static paper.
Without killing its essence in the process.
Precisely. Without destroying the very thing it was about. So we need to explore this complex, multi-layered material with, the intellectual rigor it demands, recognizing that it's designed to be a bit unsettling, especially to fixed ways of thinking.
Okay, let's start by unpacking the creation story, because understanding how the book came to be, I think that's crucial to knowing how we, as readers, are supposed to approach it.
Agreed.
The sources make it very clear. The publication of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, it was an act of preservation, orchestrated entirely by Linda Lee after her husband passed away.
That's right. It was never intended by him, not in that form, as a finalized martial arts manual for consumers. Not in the way we usually think of manuals.
So who actually did the compiling? It must have been a huge job.
Oh, immense. The person tasked with that responsibility was Gil Johnson. He had to sift through thousands of scattered notes, diverse writings, detailed drawings, and try to shape them into cohesive blocks.
And he had guidance.
Yes, absolutely. Crucially, guidance from Linda Lee herself, and also from senior students, people like Danny Inosanto, most notably.
Right.
Johnson had martial arts training himself about 8 years,
right.
But the input, the context from those senior students, the ones who had trained with the living source, that was critical for organizing material that was often, chronologically and conceptually all over the place.
And the editorial intent, you mentioned Linda Lee driving it, that was really specific, wasn't it?
Crystal clear and absolutely vital here. She was adamant.
Yeah.
This should not become a simple how-to-do-it book.
Why not?
Because students might just mimic it blindly. And that would mean falling right back into the trap of codified style, the very thing JKD was designed to get away from.
Okay. So it would defeat the whole purpose.
Exactly. And Johnson, the compiler, he fully recognized that danger. He stated his goal was specifically not to present JKD as just the remains of one man, something that died with him.
But
rather, to show it as something alive, green, and growing. And you see this reflected in how the book is structured, or perhaps how it asks not to be seen as rigidly structured.
What do you mean?
The sources explicitly tell us that the section breaks, the divisions between things like speed, power, strategy. They're put there only for convenient reading.
Only for convenience. So there's somewhat arbitrary lines.
Completely arbitrary in a philosophical sense. We cannot and should not take those divisions too seriously. The text actually encourages the reader, use a pencil, cross-reference things, realize there are no real lines between these elements.
Because in combat and in the philosophy, everything affects everything else.
Precisely. It has no definite boundaries, except the artificial ones that you, the reader, might impose on it if you're not careful.
That demand for active participation, it leads right to this core warning, doesn't it? embedded in the TJKD text itself.
It does. It basically warns readers, if you think the first line of this book or any specific technique you find in it is the most important thing, you've already failed to grasp the philosophy.
You've mistaken the finger for the moon.
That's the one, the famous metaphor. It's the ultimate hook, the guiding principle. The book itself is just a collection of fingers pointing at the moon.
And the critical insight, the thing listeners really need to internalize here is that the moon, it isn't JKD.
No, the moon is meant to be you.
You. Your own understanding, your own growth.
It demands total self-reliance. You're required to constantly go back to the text, wrestle with the often, frankly, heady and esoteric passages, and rigorously test the techniques described.
But not just to collect techniques.
No, not to accumulate knowledge like stamps in a collection. The goal is to gain true self-insight. Knowing, in this context, is described as a movement, an active state of discovery. It's not a static pile of facts.
That said, before we get purely philosophical, there are some very practical, almost mundane warnings in the source material too, right? Anchoring this high-level thinking back to physical reality.
Yes, absolutely. And it's important. The text includes a safety disclaimer. It notes that the techniques illustrated, well, they could result in injury. Consultation with a physician is essential.
A necessary grounding moment.
It really is. It reminds us that even the deepest philosophy has to deal with gravity, physics, the law. The disclaimer also points out that using these techniques for self-defense might not be legally justified in every single situation.
Which, in a way, fits the philosophy itself, doesn't it? Dealing with what is.
It perfectly aligns. You can have the perfect theory, the perfect technique in your head, but if the conditions of external reality, the laws, your physical state, the specific situation don't permit it, it's useless. The philosophy insists on seeing reality clearly without attachment to how you wish it were.
And speaking of preserving things accurately, the modern efforts to preserve the original materials, they highlight this reverence for the raw thought process itself, right?
They do. We learned about the rigorous work done deacidifying original papers, minimizing handling, all to maintain the integrity of Lee's original notes, his evolutionary sketches.
It shows the value placed on the process, not just the final product.
Exactly. Ted Wong, who was a senior practitioner, training partner, he apparently referred to the Tao not as an instruction manual, but as a roadmap.
A roadmap showing the direction the founder was heading.
Yes. And he apparently used it specifically to prompt what he called trying out time. The book isn't meant to be memorized cover to cover. It's meant to spark internal exploration, to make you experiment and discover for yourself.
Okay, let's pivot now. To the heart of the critique, this relentless intellectual attack on fixed systems. JKD seems fundamentally defined by what it rejects.
In large part, yes. It rejects the established traditions, the classical martial arts structures.
And the language used is incredibly strong. Our sources describe these traditions using terms like fancy mess.
Fancy mess.
Or that even more evocative phrase, organized despair.
Organized despair.
Yeah.
It suggests something systematic that ultimately crushes the spirit.
So where does this organized despair come from, according to the philosophy?
It seems to stem from, well, the human instinct to follow, to imitate, compounded by a rigid history and traditions behind these different patterns, these styles.
And the core issue is?
The internalization of pattern. The sources argue that practitioners become patternized mechanical robots.
Robots instead of humans.
Instead of fluid, expressive human beings. So when a real situation occurs, something fluid, maybe driven by genuine feeling like anger or fear, the rigid stylist, they can't express themselves authentically.
Why not?
They're just trying to force a conditioned response. They're listening to their own internal screams of conflict, the conflict between the pattern and the reality, rather than responding spontaneously to what is.
That image of the fluid man being crammed and distorted, it's visceral. And apparently it wasn't just theoretical.
No, it was visually represented. The sources mention a miniature tombstone placed at the Founders School in Los Angeles.
A tombstone? What did it say?
It was inscribed with this really definitive, blunt message. In memory of a once fluid man, crammed and distorted by the classical mess.
Wow. That leaves no room for ambiguity.
None at all. And that symbol, it perfectly encapsulates the whole philosophical argument. The core issue identified is the accumulation of artificiality.
Accumulation?
Yes. Traditional systems accumulate forms, techniques, rituals, things that distract from the reality of combat, which, if you strip it all down, is intrinsically simple and direct.
So the stylist is doing something about combat, not being in combat.
Exactly. They're ritually practicing stunts, perfecting forms in isolation, rather than simply being present in the combat environment,
Wow.
which is alive, constantly changing, and completely indifferent to their carefully accumulated forms.
Okay, so if accumulation is the disease, the antidote must be simplicity. Seeking simplicity.
Radical simplicity.
Yeah.
And what the text calls suchness, or isness. Reality as it is, presented nakedly, without judgment.
And this takes us deep into Zen and Taoist thinking.
Straight into it. If combat isn't fixed, if it's pure movement, then clinging to fixed forms creates an inextricable snare. You're essentially fighting yesterday's battle, not the one happening right now.
Which aligns with that idea. If you want truth to stand clear, never be for or against.
Precisely. The struggle between for and against, say, between Wing Chun and karate, or whatever styles that struggle itself, is seen as the mind's worst disease. It creates friction, internal conflict, wasted energy.
So JKD embraces this fluidity instead.
Completely. It utilizes all ways and is bound by none. It adopts any technique, any means that serves its end. The only criteria for including something are utility and efficiency, defined very simply as anything that scores.
That sounds almost chaotic, though. If you discard all fixed styles, how do you actually cultivate reliable effectiveness? Is there a structure to getting rid of structure?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And yes, there is. The journey away from the classical mess is organized. It has 3 essential stages of cultivation. It's a roadmap to formless form.
Okay, what are the stages?
It's sequential and apparently mandatory. First, the student must start by sticking to the nucleus, the basics. You have to intimately know technique before you can successfully discard it.
Makes sense. You can't break rules you don't understand.
Right. Second is the stage of liberation from the nucleus. This is often necessary, sometimes painful, breaking free from the learned patterns, the conditioning.
And the third?
The third, the ultimate achievement, is returning to original freedom. This is the state of formless form. The goal isn't anarchy, remember. It's total intuition.
That third stage, formless form, it hinges on realizing this concept of the void, right? Now, for listeners, this might sound really abstract. If JKD is supposed to be simple and direct, why bring in something esoteric like the void?
That is the pivotal question. And the voidness here, it's not emptiness like a vacuum, like nothingness.
Okay.
It's described as a state that stands right in the middle. It's all-inclusive. It has absolutely no opposite.
No opposite. But
Because it excludes nothing and opposes nothing. It's paradoxically a living void, one from which all forms can spontaneously manifest when needed.
So the fighter who reaches this state, they don't think, should I throw a jab now? Or maybe a cross?
Exactly. The attack or the defense, it just manifests. Because the mind isn't preoccupied with intellectual analysis, comparing forms, running through options.
So realizing this void actually fills you with life and power because it cuts out the delay, the milliseconds lost in decision-making.
Precisely. It's an intellectual proficiency, sure, but it has to transition into an action that is so direct, so immediate, that intellectualization simply cannot wedge itself into the process.
There's no time for it.
No time. We even see Zen poetry used to illustrate this state, this instantaneous unthinking response. No thinking, no reflecting, perfect emptiness. Yet therein something moves, following its own course.
Wow.
And the ultimate promise of achieving this state is both spiritual and tactical. Victory is for the one, even before the combat, who has no thought of himself.
By getting rid of the self that chooses styles,
You become the combat itself. You embody the response.
this philosophical foundation, it flows directly into the mental and spiritual side of things, which the source material stresses are completely inseparable from the physical act of fighting.
Absolutely inseparable.
And the first task, the paramount one, seems to be the emancipation of the mind, freeing it from its own limitations.
Yes. And the greatest hindrance to proper physical action is explicitly stated, the consciousness of self, the ego.
So the wrong thought is, I am doing this.
Right. That creates tension, hesitation, freezing.
Yeah.
The correct mental realization is more like an intuition. This is happening through me, or even it is doing this for me. The situation, the flow, the response itself. When the mind gets localized or frozen on one idea or technique, it stops flowing freely in its suchness, in its response to the present moment.
So the mind needs liberating from old habits, prejudices, restrictive thought processes, so it can intuit truth instantaneously.
Exactly.
But here's the challenge I see. If martial arts training is cumulative, we learn techniques, we build muscle memory, how can the sources advise us to die to everything of yesterday? Doesn't yesterday's knowledge inform today's movement?
That's where the crucial distinction lies between mechanical memory and living knowledge.
Explain that.
Knowledge, in the sense that text's critique, comes from accumulation. Fixed memory, it's a mechanical, static.
Wow.
The sources advise that learning, true learning, is never cumulative in that sense. It's a movement of knowing,
A movement.
an active process. So to express yourself freely, you have to die to everything of yesterday, meaning you let go of the attachment to the forms you learned. You use the experience, yes, but you aren't governed by the routine.
So you hold on to the lesson, but not the specific formula.
Perfectly put. If you cling to the old, the formulas, you get security, sure. But it's from the new, the now, that you gain the necessary flow.
It's about looking at life, which is constant movement without the bondage of time, without the burden of historical technique weighing you down.
Exactly. Which is why the approach to mental training described is different from standard practice, like just focusing harder.
How so?
The sources make a sharp distinction between concentration and meditation. Concentration is described as exclusion. You narrow your mind, focus intensely on one thing, which, they argue, actually belittles life by shutting everything else out.
Okay, so what's meditation in this context?
Meditation, conversely, is described as negation, a state of complete emptiness, or perhaps better, complete awareness, where one realizes the imperturbability, the unshakable calm of one's original nature.
And awareness, unlike concentration.
Awareness has no frontier. It's open, receptive, allowing for instantaneous response to whatever arises in the present moment.
Okay, let's bring this to the moment of actual combat. How does this philosophy translate into achieving flow, achieving imperturbability under extreme duress?
The instruction for that moment is, well, deceptively simple. The mind must be calm, undisturbed, feeling almost as if nothing critical is happening.
Seriously, like everyday behavior.
Behavior should be no different from everyday behavior. Nothing in your posture, your eyes, your breathing should scream, I am in mortal combat.
The ideal state being.
The ideal is the fighter who has no abode, no fixed place in his own mind, who moves like a kind of automaton, having given himself up to the unconscious, allowing the art, the response, to attain its perfection through him.
And we learn why this emotional control is so vital for physical execution. It ties right back into the science of kinetics.
The science is very clear on this. Excessive tension, whether it comes from anger, fear, even just trying too hard, over concentration, it causes muscles to work against their antagonistic pairs.
That internal conflict again.
It's a constant theme, and it leads directly to stiffness, clumsy movements, and immense wasted energy. The relaxed technician, the imperturbable one, by contrast, expends energy constructively. They only contract the necessary muscles right at the instant of impact.
This deep search for imperturbability, for authentic expression, it leads into some significant psychological territory too, self-awareness.
Huge.
Yeah.
And the sources draw this really critical, detailed distinction between two concepts we often confuse: pride and self-esteem.
Okay, this sounds important. What's the difference according to the text?
This is one of the most intellectually compelling parts, I think. Pride is defined as a sense of worth you get from identifying with external factors.
Like what?
Things you own, positions you hold, maybe an imaginary self you project to the world. And crucially, the sources assert the core of pride is actually self-rejection.
Self-rejection.
You reject who you truly are, and you try to become something else, something defined by those external things. Therefore, pride is sensitive, it's intolerant, it's fragile. Because the external things can always be taken away.
Okay, so that's pride. What about self-esteem?
Self-esteem, conversely, is derived from the self's own potential and achievements. It focuses on internal value, on your capabilities, your growth. It's resilient because it doesn't depend on outside validation or external badges.
The implication here for the individual and for conflict seems massive.
It is. If this autonomous individual the texts talk about, if they strive to prove their worth but find true self-esteem unattainable, maybe because of societal pressures, maybe frustration in training a rigid system, they become highly explosive.
Explosive how?
They plunge into the pursuit of pride instead. Pride becomes this volatile substitute for authentic self-esteem. The text even notes that all social disturbances have their roots in these crises of individual self-esteem.
So JKD isn't just about efficient movement. It's an avenue, maybe even a struggle, for true self-acceptance, knowing yourself.
Exactly. It's a path toward liberating yourself from those internal conflicts, finding that internal source of worth.
Right. Now let's connect that spiritual and mental mastery directly to the body's kinetic efficiency. The philosophy of no style. It demands prioritizing only what's empirically efficient, what actually works.
Correct. Function over form. Always.
And we have to start with the absolute foundation of all movement, footwork.
Footwork is hammered home again and again, emphasized as the #1 priority, receives immense detail in the notes.
There was an analogy used?
Yes, one Sifu apparently used the analogy. Footwork is like the wheels of your car. Without wheels, you cannot get anywhere, even if you have a Ferrari.
Clear enough.
The source is stress. The essence of fighting is fundamentally the art of moving, maintaining balance, controlling the geometry between you and the opponent, and the fundamental maxim is non-negotiable.
Whoever controls the distance controls the fight.
That's the one. And the sources state directly, footwork can and will beat any punch or kick.
How so?
Because a blow, no matter how fast or powerful, simply cannot land if the distance is wrong, if you're not there. This is the direct challenge to static, traditional training methods.
So JKD critiques those wide classical stances.
Heavily. Because they're seen as slow, awkward. They require a preparatory movement, a weight shift, before you can actually initiate action. That's lost time.
So what does JKD favor instead?
A very specific fighting position, known as the semi-crouch, or the small phasic bent knee stance.
Describe that.
It's low, braced, comfortably balanced, and crucially, it's ready for immediate action attack, counter-defense without any preliminary telegraphing movement. The knees are slightly bent, the feet are loaded like compressed spring.
Ready to launch instantly.
Instantly. And the coordination is vital. For instance, in a straight attack, the hand must move first, fractionally before the footsteps.
Why the hand first?
It maximizes timing and surprise. You initiate movement from the furthest point, the weapon itself, while the footstepping provides the power through the kinetic chain. It arrives almost simultaneously, but the hand leads.
Okay, next to mobility comes mastery of coordination, speed, and power. If the goal is formless form, immediate response, the body has to eliminate all internal resistance, right?
That's absolutely right. The sources point out the outstanding characteristic of the expert athlete isn't brute strength, it's their ease of movement, even during maximal effort.
Well, the novice is tense, wasting motion.
Exactly. And that ease comes from avoiding antagonistic tension. You mentioned this earlier.
That's right, the muscles working against each other.
Like the biceps and triceps. If you tense your biceps while trying to punch extending the arm with the triceps literally have to fight against that break. It increases energy costs, slows you down, leads to fatigue much faster.
So the JKD goal is relaxation until the moment of impact.
Total relaxation, then sharp contraction, then relaxation again. Which brings us to the definition of power emphasized in the texts.
Power equals force times speed.
Yes, this is critical. A powerful athlete isn't necessarily the strongest one in terms of pure static force. They're the one who can exert strengths quickly.
So speed multiplies force.
Mathematically, yes. If you increase your speed, even if the actual muscle strength, the force of contraction, stays exactly the same, you instantly increase your power output. That's why technique, relaxation, timing are prioritized over just building bulk muscle.
And this leads to a really specific training distinction, something quite practical.
Yes, the sources give an important directive for how to structure your training. Fine skills, meaning precision practice, complex movements, timing drills, these must be practiced when the athlete is fresh.
Why fresh?
Because if you practice fine skills when you're tired, you inevitably substitute gross, lazy movements for the precise ones. You risk cementing bad habits. You essentially train yourself into that organized despair through poor methodology.
And endurance, gross movements.
Those should be practiced when fatigued. That builds stamina and toughness under realistic conditions.
Okay, let's focus on the on-guard position itself and the primary tools. If economy is key, the on-guard has to be safe but instantly ready. There were precise instructions about head position.
Very precise biomechanical instructions. In the on-guard stance, the chin should be dropped and pinned tight to the collarbone.
Why pinned there?
It maximizes bone alignment for protection and stability. And the instruction specifically warns against the common mistake of tucking the point of the chin into the lid shoulder.
What's wrong with tucking it into the shoulder? Seems protective.
It seems protective, but it actually creates an unnatural neck position. It takes away muscular support from the neck, and crucially, it generates antagonistic tension in the lid arm and shoulder, which inhibits the free, instantaneous action of that lid arm. It creates that internal break again.
Got it. And the primary weapon from this stance? the straight lead punch, emphasized repeatedly.
It's called the foundation of scientific fighting skill. Fastest, most economical blow. It has to be delivered without any preparatory get-set posture, no wind-up, launching straight from that ready stance.
And there's a difference noted between just speed and timing.
A crucial difference. Speed is just mechanical velocity, how fast your limb moves. Timing is the intellectual understanding, the exploitation of the opponent's rhythm.
How do you exploit their rhythm?
You deliberately try to lengthen their reaction time, make it complex rather than simple. You do this by misdirecting their attention, attacking when they're inhaling, which is a physically vulnerable moment, or catching them when they're physically or mentally off balance.
That attention misdirection brings us back to psychology again. Feints, deception.
Yes, feinting is described as a characteristic of the expert fighter. It requires integrating the eyes, hands, body, legs, everything in a coordinated effort to deceive.
And for feints to work.
They have to seem real, not exaggerated. They need to be economical, simple, at least initially, to establish credibility. You have to make the opponent believe the feint is the attack.
What's the purpose?
It's psychological. To induce the opponent to make a defensive move, maybe commit to a parry, which you can then immediately exploit, bypass, or deceive again to land the true attack. But the overall principle remains constant.
Keep it simple.
Minimize the complexity of the attack. Simple, rapid, economical technique is always preferred.
So the ultimate goal of JKD seems to be this instantaneous response, where the deep philosophy, the void, the mental calm merges seamlessly with the physics of economical movement.
Into one single, fluid action.
Yes.
Let's try to synthesize the core principles of attack and defense that come out of this whole mindset.
Okay. On the attack, the action must be decisive, confident, executed with a single mind, no hesitation, no changing your technique halfway through. And again, the simple direct attack is usually the most effective.
In defense, how is that primarily managed?
Fundamentally through distance control. That requires constant, subtle shifting of footwork, adjusting the measure, as they call it.
And if they get past the distance control?
Then evasiveness, slipping, ducking, weaving is structurally better than blocking.
Why better than blocking? Because blocking uses force against force. It causes impact, contusion, potential injury to yourself, and it weakens the defender by expending energy unnecessarily. Evasion conserves energy and maintains flow.
But if you do need a physical defense, like a parry, there was specific guidance on timing.
Yes. Parry late rather than early.
Why late?
Timing is everything. If you parry too early, the opponent sees your action. They have time to change the direction of their blow, maybe strike an area you just uncovered. Parry late, just before impact, and their commitment to that initial line of attack is fixed. They can't change it.
Makes sense. We also saw mention of immobilization or trapping.
Yes, but primarily as a preventive measure. Pinning the opponent's hand or head, for instance.
Yeah.
Either to create a safety zone for yourself or to create a physical advantage, a brief moment where you can strike instantly without immediate fear of a counter from that limb.
So the synthesis, the ideal state described in the material, it's about being instantaneous.
Instantaneous like lightning and responsive like a reflection in a mirror. That's the imagery used.
Functioning with no technique.
Meaning you've mastered and discarded all techniques, which ironically makes you capable of executing any technique as needed.
And no way.
Meaning you've discarded rigid rules and paths, which makes you capable of using all ways, adapting to whatever the situation demands. Favoring formlessness so you can assume any and all necessary forms required by that specific moment.
This artless art.
Where the soul is at peace, like moonlight reflected in a deep, still lake. It perfectly loops back, doesn't it? Back to that idea of JKD being this original, unified field theory of the self and kinetic action.
It really does. So, to reiterate the central concept we've explored all through this deep dive, JKD is presented fundamentally as a technique for acquiring liberty.
Yes, liberty. And as a work of enlightenment.
The sources emphasize that the height of cultivation, the ultimate goal, always runs toward simplicity, the direct line.
While halfway cultivation, getting stuck in the middle, inevitably runs toward ornamentation, toward that restrictive, debilitating, organized despair.
The true purpose, then, it transcends just winning a fight.
Absolutely. Yeah. It transcends simply hurting someone or defending yourself in the physical sense. JKD is described as one of the avenues through which life can open its secrets to us, ultimately serving as this rigorous step toward knowing, accepting, and finally liberating oneself.
Okay, let's unpack this. This whole journey from critiquing fixed fighting styles to arriving at philosophical self-mastery, it's incredible.
It's profound stuff.
And the core idea, symbolized by that moon metaphor,
Hmm.
it seems to be that the real training, the true work, it doesn't start when you master the moves.
No.
It starts when you realize those moves, or frankly, any system you follow, are just fingers pointing at you.
A mirror.
Reflecting your own reality back at you. Your own constraints, maybe, or your own potential freedom.
And the sources note something interesting here, that intense desire can create not only its own opportunities, but its own talents.
Mm.
So if we accept this critique of organized despair, applying it broadly now, as any structure that restricts true personal freedom, we have to ask ourselves, right?
Yes.
In a world that's full of complex, often overwhelming fixed systems, whether they're organizational, social, intellectual, whatever, what fancy mess are you currently relying on? Maybe for security, maybe out of habit.
And what's the alternative?
What simple, direct path awaits you, potentially, when you let go of needing that external blueprint, when you start looking towards the moon, not just the finger?
That's a powerful thought to leave listeners with. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the essence of, well, ultimate self-expression and kinetic philosophy, be sure to subscribe, like us, and maybe comment with your own thoughts on that moon metaphor. What does it mean to you?
We'd love to hear your perspectives.
Thank you for listening to VSOW.